The morning light crept through the tattered curtains, illuminating the wrinkles on Rose Calloway's face as she stared at her reflection. At 38, the frontier had not been kind to her appearance, but Rose knew it was her resilience, not her beauty, that had kept her alive in Willow Creek, Arizona Territory, 1885. "Miss Calloway, are you certain you wish to continue this futile search for employment, Mrs.?" Abernathy's shrill voice called from downstairs. "A woman of your advanced age might be better suited for less demanding positions." Rose smoothed her faded blue dress and pinned her graying auburn hair into a neat bun. "I'm perfectly capable of honest work, Mrs. Abernathy," she replied, descending the creaking staircase of the boarding house. "And I intend to prove it." The streets of Willow Creek bustled with morning activity. Rose clutched her worn leather satchel containing references from her previous position as housekeeper for a wealthy family in Boston. That life seemed a distant memory now, vanished with her parents' deaths and the subsequent discovery of their overwhelming debts. The journey west had been her last hope for a fresh start. "Morning, Miss Calloway," greeted Mr. Peterson, the town's elderly shopkeeper. "Any luck finding work?" "Not yet," Rose admitted, "but today feels promising." Mr. Peterson's sympathetic smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps the widow Jenkins needs help with her mending. It's not much, but it's something for a woman in your position." Your position. The words stung more than they should have. Rose had heard similar phrases throughout town for weeks. A woman your age should settle for what she can get. "Isn't it past time you resigned yourself to spinsterhood? You're a bit long in the tooth to be choosy." Rose thanked Mr. Peterson politely and continued toward the general store, where a notice board displayed various job postings. As she scanned the weathered papers, a booming voice made her jump. "Those advertisements won't do you any good, madam." Rose turned to find Sheriff Thomas Wilson shaking his head. "Most of those postings are months old, Miss Calloway." "I see," Rose replied, trying to mask her disappointment. "Are there any recent opportunities you might know of?" The sheriff adjusted his hat. "Well, there is one, though I'm not sure it's suitable for a lady like yourself. Isaac Kincaid's looking for someone to help with his boys and the household. His ranch is about 5 miles outside town." "Isaac Kincaid," Rose repeated. "Hard-working rancher, lost his wife to fever 3 years back, has 3 young sons he's raising alone. Decent man, if a bit rough around the edges." The sheriff scratched his chin. "But Miss Calloway, it's isolated out there and those boys are quite the handful." "At your age—" "Thank you for the information, Sheriff," Rose interrupted, straightening her shoulders. "Which direction is the Kincaid Ranch?" An hour later, Rose found herself walking along a dusty road leading away from town. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she regretted not bringing more water. Just as she was considering whether to continue or turn back, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her pause. A wagon appeared around the bend, driven by a man with broad shoulders and a stern expression partially hidden beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. Beside him sat a boy of perhaps 10 or 11 with the same strong jawline as his father. "Madam," the man called, slowing the horses. "You're a fair piece from town. Everything all right?" Rose swallowed her pride. "I'm looking for the Kincaid Ranch. Would you happen to know the way?" The man studied her, his piercing blue eyes taking in her dusty dress and determined stance. "I'm Isaac Kincaid. This here's my eldest, Jacob." "Mr. Kincaid," Rose said, relief washing over her. "I'm Rose Calloway. I heard in town you might be looking for help with your household." Isaac's eyebrows rose slightly. "You heard right, but it's hard work, Miss Calloway. Long days, 3 rowdy boys, and a house that hasn't seen a woman's touch in years." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Kincaid," Rose replied firmly, "and I've extensive experience running a household." Isaac exchanged a look with his son, who shrugged. "We're heading home now. Climb aboard if you'd like to see the place before making any decisions." Rose hesitated only briefly before accepting his outstretched hand and climbing onto the wagon. Jacob slid over to make room, eyeing her curiously. "You talk fancy," the boy observed. like my teacher. Jacob, Isaac warned. It's quite all right, Rose assured him. I was raised in Boston, Jacob. This is my first time in the Arizona territory. What brought you out here? Isaac asked, flicking the reins gently. Rose considered how much to share. My parents passed away last year. There was nothing left for me in Boston. Isaac nodded, seeming to understand what remained unsaid. Sorry for your loss. The remainder of the journey passed in comfortable silence. As they crested a hill, Rose caught her first glimpse of the Kincaid ranch, a sprawling property with a sturdy two-story house, a large barn, and several corrals filled with cattle and horses. It was larger and more prosperous-looking than she had expected. It's not much compared to Boston standards, Isaac said, noticing her expression, but it's home. It's beautiful, Rose replied honestly. As the wagon pulled up to the house, two more boys burst through the front door. The middle child appeared to be around 8, with a mischievous grin and a toy wooden horse clutched in one hand. The youngest couldn't have been more than 5, his face smudged with dirt and what looked suspiciously like jam. Pa, we caught a toad big as my fist. The middle boy exclaimed, then stopped short when he noticed Rose. Who's she? Samuel, mind your manners, Isaac chided. This is Miss Calloway. She's here about helping us out. He turned to the youngest. And Ethan, what have you been into? The little boy hid behind his brother, suddenly shy. Isaac helped Rose down from the wagon. These are my sons, Jacob, you've met, then Samuel and Ethan. It's a pleasure to meet you all, Rose said warmly. Miss Calloway might be staying to help with the cooking and such, Isaac explained to the boys, so you'd best be on your best behavior. Samuel frowned. Ain't she kinda old to be doing all that work? Rose felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but Isaac's response was swift and firm. Samuel Kincaid, that's no way to speak to a lady. Apologize this instant. Samuel kicked at the dirt. Sorry, madam. It's quite all right, Rose said, though the comment stung. Even children noticed what the townspeople whispered about that at 38. She was past her prime, a burden rather than an asset. Isaac seemed to sense her discomfort. Boys, go wash up. I'll show Miss Calloway around. As the children scampered off, Isaac turned to Rose. I apologize for Samuel. He speaks before he thinks. Children are honest, at least, Rose replied with a small smile. Isaac led her into the house. The main room was spacious but cluttered, with boots scattered across the floor, dishes piled in the sink, and a thin layer of dust covering every surface. It was clear that the house had been maintained with function, not comfort, in mind. As you can see, we could use some help, Isaac said, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. The boys and I do what we can, but with the ranch work. I understand completely, Rose assured him. May I? She gestured toward the kitchen area. Isaac nodded, and Rose began to inspect the space. The pantry was well stocked, if disorganized, and the stove appeared to be in good working order. Despite the chaos, she could see the potential. What exactly would my duties entail, Mr. Kincaid? She asked. Isaac leaned against the doorframe. Cooking, cleaning, mending. Helping the boys with their schoolwork. Jacob and Samuel attend the schoolhouse in town, but Ethan's still too young. He paused. I can offer room and board plus $15 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was fair. Rose nodded. And where would I stay? Isaac led her upstairs to a small but pleasant room at the end of the hall. This was my wife's sewing room. We can move in a proper bed if you decide to stay. Rose looked around the sunny space. It's lovely. The position is yours if you want it, Miss Calloway, Isaac said. But I want you to understand what you're getting into. We rise before dawn. The days are long. The boys can be challenging. Rose met his gaze directly. Mr. Kincaid, I've managed a household of 12, including 4 children. I've organized dinner parties for Boston's elite. I've nursed the sick and taught the young. I may not be as spry as I once was, but I assure you I am more than capable. A flicker of respect crossed Isaac's features. Never said you weren't, madam. Just want to be sure you know what to expect. When would you like me to start? How about a trial? Stay for supper, help get the boys to bed. If you still want the position in the morning, it's yours. Rose agreed, and Isaac left her to freshen up while he returned to his chores. Alone in the small room, Rose allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was she making a mistake? This isolated ranch, a widower with 3 wild boys, it was hardly the life she'd imagined for herself. But then again, nothing had gone according to plan since her parents' deaths. And something about Isaac Kincaid's straightforward manner and the challenge in his eyes made her want to prove herself. By supper time, Rose had transformed the kitchen. The dishes were washed, the floor swept, and a hearty stew simmered on the stove. She'd even managed to bake a batch of cornbread using ingredients she'd found in the disorganized pantry. The boys tumbled in from outside, their eyes widening at the sight of the set table and the delicious smells filling the house. "Wash up before you sit," Rose instructed firmly but kindly. To her surprise, they obeyed without argument. Even Isaac looked impressed as he entered, hat in hand, the day's work evident in the dirt on his clothes and the weariness in his shoulders. "Something smells mighty fine, Miss Calloway," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Just a simple stew," Rose replied, though she couldn't help feeling pleased by his appreciation. Dinner was a lively affair. The boys, initially wary, quickly warmed to Rose as she encouraged them to tell her about themselves. Jacob spoke of his interest in books, Samuel boasted about his riding skills, and little Ethan shyly showed her a drawing he'd made. "Miss Calloway, are you gonna stay?" Ethan asked as Rose served him a second helping of stew. Rose glanced at Isaac, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. "We'll see, Ethan. Your father and I are still discussing it." After dinner, Rose oversaw the boys' bedtime routine, helping Ethan with his bath and listening to Samuel read a chapter from his school book. By the time all 3 were tucked in, the sun had long since set. She found Isaac on the front porch smoking a pipe and gazing at the stars. He stood when she approached. "The boys are asleep," she informed him, "all 3, even Samuel." Isaac looked genuinely surprised. "That boy usually fights sleep like it's his sworn enemy," Rose smiled. "He was quite tired after reading to me. He's quite good, you know. Thank you for saying so." Isaac gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Join me." Rose hesitated only briefly before taking a seat. The night was cool but pleasant, and the sky above was a tapestry of stars unlike anything she'd seen in Boston. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Isaac said, following her gaze upward. "Sometimes I think that's why Catherine and I stayed even when times were hard, couldn't bear to leave this sky." "Catherine was your wife?" Rose asked gently. Isaac nodded, his expression softening with memory. "Married 15 years before the fever took her. She was the bravest woman I ever knew, followed me out here when this was nothing but a plot of land and a dream." "You've built something remarkable," Rose observed. "She would be proud, I think." "Maybe of the ranch," Isaac conceded, "but the house, the boys, I know I've let things slide." He turned to face her. "Miss Calloway, I've been watching you today. You've done more in a few hours than I've managed in months. The boys respond to you. And that meal was the first proper one we've had in longer than I care to admit." Rose felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid." "So have you decided, will you stay?" Rose considered the question carefully. "I believe I will, yes, for a month to start. We can reassess then." Isaac's relief was visible. "That's fine news, the boys will be pleased." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. "May I ask you something, Miss Calloway?" Isaac finally said. "Of course. What really brought you to Willow Creek?" "A woman with your refinement and education, there must have been opportunities in Boston, even after your parents passed." Rose sighed, deciding honesty was the best approach. "My father's investments failed. The creditors took everything, the house, the furnishings, even my mother's jewelry. My position as housekeeper was complicated by unwanted attentions from the master of the house." She folded her hands in her lap. "I came west because I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Unfortunately, Willow Creek wasn't quite the land of opportunity I'd hoped for." Because of your age, Isaac asked bluntly. Rose looked at him, startled by his perception. Yes, it seems 38 is considered practically ancient for a woman seeking employment or other opportunities. Isaac snorted. Foolishness. I'm 42 myself, and no one's suggesting I'm past my prime. The world judges men and women by different standards, Mr. Kincaid. Isaac, he corrected. If you're staying, you might as well use my given name. Then you must call me Rose. He nodded, tapping out his pipe against the porch railing. Well, Rose, for what it's worth, I think those town folks are idiots. Experience counts for something in my book. I wouldn't trust my boys to some giggly 16-year-old, no matter how pretty. The compliment, indirect as it was, warmed Rose more than it should have. Thank you, Isaac. I should turn in now. Morning comes early on a ranch, I imagine. That it does, he agreed, standing as she rose. Good night, Rose. Good night, Isaac. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Rose settled into life at the Kincaid Ranch. She established routines for the boys, organized the chaotic household, and transformed the neglected garden into a source of fresh vegetables for their meals. Isaac, true to his word, had a proper bed moved into her room, along with a small dresser for her few belongings. The boys adjusted to her presence with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Jacob, the eldest, was respectful but reserved, clearly missing his mother and perhaps wary of growing attached to another maternal figure. Samuel, after his initial rudeness, became Rose's most eager helper, shadowing her around the house and bombarding her with endless questions. Little Ethan simply bloomed under her attention, his shy demeanor giving way to a cheerful, affectionate nature that tugged at Rose's heartstrings. As for Isaac, he remained something of a mystery. He was unfailingly polite and appreciative of her efforts, but maintained a certain distance. Rose often caught him watching her with his sons, an unreadable expression on his weathered face. One evening, as Rose was teaching Samuel how to properly set the table, a commotion outside drew their attention. A wagon was approaching, driven by a well-dressed woman with a pinched expression. "It's Mrs. Holloway from town," Samuel informed her. "She's awful fancy and makes Pa uncomfortable." Rose smoothed her apron and went to the door just as Isaac emerged from the barn to greet the visitor. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, removing his hat. "This is unexpected." The woman, perhaps 30 and quite beautiful, smiled brightly. "Mr. Kincaid, I've brought those preserves I promised, and some fresh baked goods for the boys." Her gaze shifted to Rose, standing in the doorway. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "This is Miss Calloway," Isaac explained. "She's helping with the household and the boys." Mrs. Holloway's smile tightened. "How lovely, though I did offer to assist you myself, Mr. Kincaid." "Your offer was appreciated," Isaac replied diplomatically, "but Miss Calloway lives here now. It's a better arrangement for the boys." The woman's eyes narrowed as she assessed Rose. "I see. Well, I should be going. Enjoy the preserves." She handed Isaac a basket, then climbed back into her wagon without another word. Rose waited until the wagon was out of sight before approaching Isaac. She seemed disappointed. Isaac shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "Marjorie Holloway's been widowed about a year. She's made it clear she's looking to change that status." "And you're not interested?" Rose asked before she could stop herself. Isaac met her gaze directly. "No, madam, I am not." "The boys need stability, not a stepmother who sees them as an inconvenience." Rose nodded, surprised by the relief she felt at his answer. "I should finish dinner preparations." "Rose," Isaac called as she turned to go, "you've been here nearly a month now, are you, planning to stay on?" The question caught her off guard. "Do you wish me to?" "The boys would be mighty disappointed if you left," he said carefully. "And you," a fleeting smile crossed his face. "I've grown accustomed to proper meals and clean shirts." It wasn't exactly a declaration of affection, but Rose found herself smiling anyway. "Then I'll stay, Isaac. For now." The seasons changed, summer giving way to fall. Rose's position at the Kincaid Ranch became more established with each passing day. She no longer thought of herself as an employee but as an integral part of the household. The boys now turned to her for comfort, guidance, and approval, and she found herself loving them as if they were her own. Her relationship with Isaac, however, remained complicated. There was a growing warmth between them, evident in their evening conversations on the porch and the way his hand sometimes lingered when passing her the coffee at breakfast. But neither of them seemed willing to acknowledge the shift. In late October, as the first chill of winter crept into the air, Isaac announced that he needed to travel to Tucson on business. "It'll be 3 days, maybe 4, he told Rose as they washed dishes together after dinner. "Jacob knows the basic ranch chores, but I've asked Tim Miller from the neighboring property to check in. We'll manage just fine," Rose assured him, "though the boys will miss you." Isaac dried a plate slowly. "And you, Rose, will you miss me too?" The question hung in the air between them. Rose kept her eyes on the soapy water. "The house is always quieter when you're gone." It wasn't the answer he'd been looking for, she knew, but it was all she dared give. Their current arrangement was precarious enough without complicating it with feelings she wasn't sure he reciprocated. Isaac left the next morning, and the days without him seemed unusually long. The boys were restless, and even Rose found herself checking the road more often than necessary. On the third day, a fierce storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain and winds that rattled the windows. "Will Pa be all right in this storm?" Ethan asked as thunder shook the house. "Your father is very capable," Rose assured him, though she couldn't help but worry herself. "I'm sure he'll wait it out somewhere safe." That night, after the boys were asleep, Rose sat by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. The rational part of her new Isaac was likely delayed in Tucson or sheltering in a town along the way. But another part, the part that had grown to care deeply for the quiet rancher, couldn't help but fear for his safety. It was nearly midnight when she heard hoofbeats approaching through the storm. Rose rushed to the door, grabbing a lantern, and stepped onto the porch just as a drenched figure dismounted. "Isaac," she called over the howling wind. He secured his horse and hurried to the shelter of the porch, water streaming from his hat and coat. "Didn't expect to find you waiting up," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I was worried," Rose admitted, leading him inside. "You shouldn't have traveled in this weather." "Wanted to get home," he replied simply, removing his sodden coat. "The boys all right, fast asleep." "They missed you terribly." Rose busied herself stoking the fire and putting on water for coffee. "You need to get dry before you catch your death. I'll fetch some towels." When she returned with towels and a clean shirt, Isaac had removed his wet boots and was standing by the fire, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. He took the offerings with a grateful nod. "You should have seen Tucson, Rose," he said as he dried his hair. "It's growing like wildfire. New buildings everywhere, even a proper theater." "It sounds exciting," Rose replied, preparing the coffee. "Got to thinking while I was there," Isaac continued, his tone casual, "about the future, about what the boys need." Rose's hand stilled. Was this his way of telling her he'd found someone else? A younger woman, perhaps, who could give his sons new siblings? "Oh, they need stability," Isaac said, turning to face her. "They need to know that the people they love won't disappear." Rose couldn't meet his eyes. "I have no intention of leaving the boys, Isaac, not unless you wish it." "And what about me?" he asked quietly. "Would you leave me?" The question forced her to look at him. His expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I don't understand." Isaac took a step toward her. "I think you do, Rose. I think you've known for some time how I feel about you." Rose's heart hammered in her chest. How do you feel?" "Like I've been given a second chance at happiness." He took another step closer. "When Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. Then you arrived with your Boston manners and your determination, and suddenly my house was a home again." "Isaac, let me finish," he insisted gently. "I know I'm not much of a catch. I'm a rancher with 3 wild boys and more gray in my beard than brown. But I love you, Rose Calloway, and I hope you might feel something for me too." Rose felt tears welling in her eyes. The town will talk. They already think I'm too old to be of any real use. They'll say you could do better. Isaac's laugh was soft but genuine. Let them talk. I don't give a damn what anyone in Willow Creek thinks except you and my boys. And what do the boys think? Rose asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why don't you ask them yourself? Isaac suggested, glancing toward the stairs. Rose turned to find Jacob, Samuel, and Ethan sitting on the steps in their nightshirts, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. How long have you three been eavesdropping? Isaac demanded, though there was no real anger in his tone. Since we heard the horse, Jacob admitted. We wanted to make sure you got home safe. Rose felt a blush creeping up her cheeks. Boys, your father and I were having a private conversation. Are you gonna marry Pa? Samuel asked bluntly. Because if you do, that means you'd be our ma for real, right? The directness of the question left Rose speechless. She looked to Isaac, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. That's what I'm asking her, Samuel, Isaac confirmed, but it's Miss Calloway's decision. 3 pairs of young eyes and 1 pair of weathered blue ones all focused on Rose, waiting for her answer. In that moment, she saw not just her past and present, but a possible future one filled with love, purpose, and family. All the things she'd thought were beyond her reach. Yes, she said finally, her voice strengthening with each word. Yes, I would very much like to marry your father and be a mother to you boys, if you'll have me. The room erupted in cheers. Ethan launched himself off the stairs and into Rose's arms while Samuel whooped loudly. Even Jacob, usually so reserved, was grinning from ear to ear. Isaac moved to her side, slipping an arm around her waist. Is that a yes, then? He murmured close to her ear. Rose turned to face him, still holding Ethan. It's a yes, Isaac Kincaid, though heaven knows what people will say. They'll say I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona territory, Isaac replied, and then, in front of his sons, he leaned down and kissed her. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek. To Rose's surprise, many of the townspeople who had once dismissed her now offered congratulations, seemingly won over by Isaac's obvious devotion and the boys' enthusiastic endorsement of their new mother, Mrs. Abernathy, who had once suggested Rose settle for less demanding positions, even brought a wedding cake. Never seen a family fit together so natural-like, she admitted to Rose. Seems I misjudged you, dear. Mr. Peterson, the shopkeeper, approached the couple after the ceremony. Miss Calloway or Mrs. Kincaid now, I should say I owe you an apology. I thought you were reaching beyond your station, but it's clear as day you're exactly where you belong. Even Mrs. Holloway offered stilted congratulations, though her smile never quite reached her eyes. As they rode back to the ranch in a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers by the boys, Isaac took Rose's hand in his. Happy, Mrs. Kincaid? Rose looked back at the 3 boys following on their ponies, their faces alight with joy. Then she turned to her husband, this man who had seen her worth when others could not. Happier than I ever thought possible. You know, Isaac said thoughtfully, I hired you to cook for my sons, but I think I always hoped you'd stay forever for a different reason. Rose squeezed his hand. And what reason is that? Isaac's smile was warm as the Arizona sun. Because some of us are smart enough to recognize a treasure when we find one, no matter what package it comes in. As the wagon crested the hill overlooking their ranch, their home, Rose knew that the journey that had brought her west, with all its hardships and disappointments, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Not despite her age, but because of it. Because the woman she had become, with all her experiences and wisdom, was precisely the woman Isaac Kincaid and his sons needed. And as Isaac helped her down from the wagon, his strong hands gentle at her waist and his eyes full of promise, Rose Calloway Kincaid knew that her life was not ending as she had once feared, but beginning anew in ways she had never dared to dream.